this section we're going to take a look at exercise number 2, which is placing in the ramp 4 profile. So this is the group exercise number 2. So following along in the manual, it looks like we're going to open the civil geometry file, which we did in previous exercises, but we're just going to go through this as though we haven't done any of the other exercises. So we're going to check out the coordinate system, which is under reality modeling. Okay, we're going to pull that from the library if it's not already there. It's going to be the C.D. Miller state plane central zone. And then we're going to set the terrain model active and open up ramp 4 in the profile model. So let's do those first 7 steps. I'm going to look in MicroStation here. Ramp 4 is this location right here. That is the item that we're going to be working with. Okay. So what it said is to open this file. So this file is just the civil geometry for J5P 3181. So go ahead and find that file and open that file up, and that's what we have here. Okay. It says let's take a look at, make sure that we have under reality modeling our coordinate system, and our coordinate system is set to the C.D. Miller. If it had blank here, you can go to that second option in here from library. It'll pull up our MoDOT library that we have created out there, and underneath the modified geographic coordinate system there should be a C.D. Miller state plane out here that's by US foot. Okay, that's the one we're going to apply here. So once that's in, we can close that out. The other thing it said to do was to go ahead and set this ground as active. So that's the second option in here. If you highlight the terrain model, the second option would be to activate it. Right now it's already activated. So if I click on that again, it deactivates it. Click on it again and we'll activate it. By activating it, you will get an existing ground profile automatically. Okay, the last step, the step 7 that we had in there was to open up ramp 4 in the profile model. So we're going to go ahead and open up window 8 if you don't already have that open. We're going to come out here and select ramp 4, just left click on it, get the heads up tool, and we want the second option in there, which is open profile model, and we're just going to left click inside of view 8. Okay, so that gets us all the way through step 7. And step 8 there was to go ahead and data point in view 8, and you could zoom around if you wanted to, or pan around in the profile model and take a look. Part of step 9 here is zooming around. It says there is a connector road that crosses over our new ramp 4, and there's an active profile on that connector road. So we want to place a point in the profile window at the elevation where the connector road intersects this ramp 4. So we're going to use one of the tools that we learned in this chapter, which is the profile intersection point, and that's underneath the profile creation tools. And we're going to go through and locate an element to show intersection, locate element which intersects, and it's going to place us a little point out there in our profile model of that elevation at that location. There is a little note here that says you might want to turn on line weights because this little dot is a tiny little dot. And if you don't have line weights turned on, it might be difficult to see. So you may want to turn the line weights on, and we'll talk about that when we look at it. Okay, so let's go in and do those steps. Okay, so in those steps it says that the connector road, which I hover over it, it says that it does have an active profile called connector road proposed, and we want our profile to connect right up to the center of that. There are other points in there. If you had a corridor running through here and you wanted to match the edge of pavement or the edge of shoulder as it ran through there, you could use this same operation, this same tool, to match those elevations. A lot of times with a profile, that's what I would do, is once I had the corridor on here, I would have the profile for ramp 4 go up and connect up to that edge of shoulder and edge of pavement, so I'm at those elevations. But for this example, we are going to go in and put it right here at the connector road and the ramp 4 intersection. Okay, so the way they have us do this is we're going to go up to the open roads modeling at the very top. We're going to be underneath the geometry tools here. We're going to go to the vertical tools here, and this is under the profile creation tools. Okay, in ORD they put things in drop downs, and so this particular item is at the very bottom of that profile creation drop down, profile intersection point. So we'll go ahead and select that. Now I talked about line weights, so before I actually go any further with this, I'm going to go over here into view 8 and just double check that we have line weights turned on, and in this case we do. So I'll go back to this view, make sure I can see window 8. If that closes that view out, just go ahead and reopen it. So what it's asking me for in this view is to locate the element to show intersection. Okay, so this is going to be the item and where you want the point to show. So this is kind of a confusing pop-up. It doesn't really ask me what I would think it would be, but it says locate element to show intersection. So that is going to be what profile do you want that point to show up in. So we're going to pick ramp 4, left click on it. Then it says locate element which intersects, and that's going to be your connector road. So we'll left click on it, and in our view 8, even if you don't have that popped up right now, you can go ahead and open it back up. You will see a magenta point that represents the elevation of the connector road profile. So let's hit F4 here, and if we look at view 8, we can hover over that point, and if you let your mouse rest there, it will tell you that that point is off the connector road. It'll give you a station and elevation. That station and elevation is for ramp 4. Okay, so that's station 0 on ramp 4. Elevation of 777.06. Okay, and then it represents the connector road, and then it's got feature definitions based off that active profile and what level it's on. Okay, so if we were to modify the connector road elevations or profile, if we opened that up and modified that, this point would also modify up or down depending on how you change that connector road. When we use our profile tools, if we AccuSnap to that point, then our profile in here will always be connected to it. It'll have that design intent, and it'll raise and lower if this profile raises and lowers. Okay, so that's the nice thing about that. So we have that point in there, and we're going to come back and take a look at the next steps. So we scroll down through here, and this is the profile we're going to try and create. We're going to snap to that magenta point, and then we got a 4% slope down to 2 plus 50, and we've got a curve length for between VPI and VPI 3, between 2 and 3, we've got a 340 foot curve. Okay, then between 3 and 4 we've got a 300 foot vertical curve, and we've got different slopes out there. This last slope, you don't have to plug that in. That should be automatic for you, but you can plug that in. But when you snap to the end of the alignment, that's kind of what we're looking for, is that negative 0.94%. As long as you hit that, you've done good. Okay, so we're going to do this with Civil AccuDraw and the slope option. Okay, the tool that we're going to actually use is going to be the profile line between points. So in the other exercises we used complex by PI, or we just went out with the complex by PI and drew all of our different VPIs in there and then went and modified it. or you use the Complex by VPI tool and Civil AccuDraw and then plugged in your curve lengths as you went along. This is another way to do it, is to go out and create a line between points, so each individual tangent will be a line, and then you can put curves in between those lines. As you can kind of see, we're going down through here, and there's a profile curve between elements tool that we're going to use to put in our curves. Okay, so we'll be coming back to this one quite a bit. So to start off, we're going to take a look at the line between points and Civil AccuDraw with the slope. Okay, so our first point is to snap to the magenta point and go at -4% to 2 plus 50. So let's see if we can do that. So we'll come out here on the screen. I'm just going to maximize my profile window. I'm going to be working in here the whole time. Okay, so we're going to kind of zoom in to where we can see the whole profile. I don't want to have to zoom around a whole lot inside of here. I just want to be able to draw my profile in. So to start that, it says to go ahead and have Civil AccuDraw running and go ahead and have the slope method. So if it's on Z, go ahead and choose slope. The next thing is underneath the vertical tools. So if you're in open roads modeling, geometry, we're going to go into the vertical and do lines. Now you have to be careful here because there's a lines for horizontal as well. And if you draw a line for horizontal in here, it's going to let you do that. But it's going to draw it in the horizontal model. And you don't necessarily know where that's going to go. So you just want to make sure that you've got the ones for vertical. Okay, so I'm going to pick that tool, which is just the first one in the list, profile line between points. And we're going to come out here on the screen and you can see Civil AccuDraw is running. I've got a station and a slope. For this first one, we don't really care about that. We're going to AccuSnap to this magenta point. AccuSnap is turned on down here at the bottom. So I'm just going to hover over that point, let my mouse rest there, and it should allow you to snap to that. So you can left click on that, and then it's going to ask you to give it a station and a slope. So we know that station is 2 plus 50. So we'll type that in and hit enter. That locks it in. Then you'll move your mouse around. Now that locked it in at 2 plus 50 and goes down to the slope. Okay, so that slope, if we take a look again at what that is, that's -4%. So we're going to come back in here and we're going to do a slope of -4 and enter that in. Move the mouse around and it should lock you in -4, and it gives you a length of 250 because that's 2 plus 50. And we'll left click to place that line there. Okay, so we've got that in there. Let me get back here. Okay, our next line, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing here, is we've gotten through step 17. We're going to go back to the profile line between points tool, and we're going to snap to the end of that 2 plus 50, and in Civil AccuDraw our next station is at 9 plus 00 at 5.5%. So that's what we've got here. We're going to snap to that line we just drew. Then with Civil AccuDraw we're going to go to 9 plus 00, enter that in at 5.5%. Okay, so even though Civil AccuDraw kind of has you there already, you can't just accept that. You do need to snap to that. So let's just double check here that we got the right tool, profile line between points. So we'll select that again. Come out here on the screen, we've got AccuSnap going, so I'm just going to AccuSnap to the end of that line. Okay, that also sets the compass there for Civil AccuDraw. And our station this time is going to be 9 plus 00, and we're going to enter that in. Move the mouse around a little bit, and you can even move your mouse up to where you can see the slope starting to get to the location we want to be at. Okay, and for our slope we can do 5.5, enter that in, and it will lock it in there. And we'll go ahead and left click to accept that. Okay, so that gets us through step 20. 21, we're going to go basically use the same tool, profile line between points, snap to that 9 plus 00, and then we're going to snap to where the ground actually meets the edge of our horizontal element. That's the length of that. Okay, so let's go out and do that. So we're going to use that same tool, lines, line between points. We're going to snap right at the end of that 9 plus 0, 0. And then we're going to snap to the end of that green dashed line representing our existing ground. As you can see on my screen right there, the slope is negative 0.94. That's how you know that you've got it exactly at the right spot. That is the last slope. So we'll right click then after you get that in there, and this is what your profile should look like currently. So now we've got to come back in here and fill in our curves or our parabolas with the information given, and then we're going to piece it all together and to make it one chain. Okay, so in here we're going to use the profile curve between elements, and that is underneath the curves portion of this, and it's the last item in there. And we're going to do the parabola between elements because we usually want to do a parabola. Kind of explain that here in this note that we're going to be using parabolic curve, and our first one's going to be 340 foot. Okay. For our first element, we're going to be doing that first line that we drew, and our second element will be the one that comes off that, goes from 2 plus 50 to 9. Okay. 340 foot, and then we're going to trim them both. So let's try to do those steps. Civil AccuDraw is unnecessary right now, so I'm going to turn that off. I don't like that running if I'm not using it. Once we get that in there, so we're going to make sure we're under the vertical tools again, not the horizontal tools. And we're going to go to the curves option, profile curve between elements, and we're going to do a parabola between elements. When that tool pops up, you've got a length that you can plug in there. So our length we're going to put in at 340 and enter that in. Our current trim method is set to both. If yours is not set to both, you can go ahead and change that to both, and it will trim these two lines out. Okay, so as we move down to the screen, it's asking us for the first profile element. So we're going to go ahead and pick that first line that we drew in there. Locate the second profile element. That will be the one that goes to 9 plus 0, 0. So we'll left click it. It asks which quadrant do you want this in, so you can move this around until you get it above those two lines or in between those two elements. We've got a length of 340, so we're going to left click to accept that, and then we're going to left click to trim and extend both. Okay, so now we have that curve in there. So the next thing we're going to do is exactly the same tool. We're going to go give it a 300 foot length curve instead of a 340. So that's the only difference that we're going to do here. So let's see if we can do that out on the screen. This one's going to be 300 and it's going to be between these two lines. So we're using the same tool. I like to go ahead and pick it again from the list. So underneath the curves, pull down profile curve between elements, parabola between elements. I like to reset those tools if possible. And in here I'm going to give it 300 and enter that in. So that'll lock in that curve length. And we'll trim and extend both again. This time we're going to go between these two elements, so we'll left click on the second element. The next element will be the third or the last element, so we'll left click on it. And then we're going to try to move this around to where we can get it at the bottom part of the screen or in between those two tangent elements. It gives us the 300, that's what we're looking for. So we'll left click and then trim and extend. We'll do both on that one, and we'll left click. Okay, I'm going to hit F4, and what you can see that we have here is we have that first tangent line, we have the arc, the next tangent line, arc, and then that last tangent line. So we want to combine these all together. Right now they're individual elements. Pick on them. Okay. As you can see, they are civil elements because they do have the pop-up information that can be modified. Okay. If they don't have that, when you complex these together, the complex will not have that ability. So you just want to make sure that you use civil tools. ORD allows you to use old MicroStation tools such as SmartLine, the ARCs and all that to create your profiles. You can certainly do that, but I would suggest then to apply civil rules to that after you do that. So if you were to create it with regular MicroStation lines under Design Elements in the Geometry tab, you would want to create civil ruled features so that you can modify those elements after you create the complex. Okay, but you need to do that before you create the complex. So here we are in step 35. It says select the Profile Complex by Element tool, and that's going to be under the vertical complex geometry area. Little picture here, complex geometry, profile complex by elements, and we're going to name it ramp for proposed. We're going to set the method to automatic, and we're going to use the MoDOT baseline proposed as our feature definition. Okay, so ramp for proposed. Basically, here are the steps to it. We're going to highlight that first line, and it's going to give an arrow to the direction that it's going to try to fill that in. And then all you have to do is left click to accept that. So let's try doing that. Again, that's going to be named ramp for proposed. So let's go back into MicroStation here. And the tool that it wants us to use is under Geometry, under Vertical, Complex Geometry. And that first one in there, Profile Complex by Element. So we'll choose that. It says our method here is going to be automatic, which means that all these items connect to one another, so you'll only have to pick the first one and accept it, and it should locate all of the connecting items. Our feature definition, we're going to set that to MoDOT baseline proposed, and then we're going to give it ramp for proposed for a name and enter that in. Okay, we'll move out here on the screen. It says locate the first element, so that is going to be that first line, and it's kind of hard to see because it's got locate first element out there, but there's a little arrow. There we go. You can see that arrow that's pointing in the direction that we're going to create this. So we'll go ahead and left click on that. It's going to select the whole entire element, and all we have to do is accept the complex in a blank area, which is a left click in a blank area. Now if I hit F4, come out here and you can hover over it and you've got one piece. You select it, and let's take a look at the properties of that. Okay, so the properties say it is ramp for proposed. I always like to double check that in case the name doesn't stick. Then MoDOT baseline proposed is our feature definition for that. Okay. Each part is has the ability to be edited. So if it's orange like this, that's the current color scheme we're using. If it's orange like this, you can modify it. If it's white like this, you can't modify it. Okay. Not by selecting the whole entire element. If you want to modify the ones in between, you have to come down and grab the actual tangent portion of that, and then some of it becomes available to edit. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the next portion of that. So we completed all the way down to step 36. We can update the server copy at this point if we'd like to. We can also create a profile report. That's step 38. And we'll take a look at the report as it gets created. And that will finish this out. So let's go show how to do that real quick. So as far as updating the server copy, once you've got it in there and you like it, if this is the one that you want to use, sometimes you also might want to set it as the active profile. Okay. So now that the program knows that this profile is the one that I'm going to be using for this project. Then it has this update the server copy, which is underneath the file, pull down, update server copy. And what that does is it applies the changes that you've made back into ProjectWise. The drawing saves itself as we go, so it's constantly saving to your local machine. But when you update the server copy, if someone else is working on this project and they had this particular file referenced into theirs, you could now tell them to go ahead and update their version, and they would have the new active profile and could begin to use it. Okay, the last thing that it had us do in this exercise was to go out and take a report. So the reports are again in the heads up tool. So we'll select it, go over and hit profile report, and that will pop up our profile report. Okay. These reports are all the same pretty much as they used to be. You've got different versions of the report that you can look at depending on how you want to see it. And then again, underneath the tools format options, you can tell it how you want the stationing to read, and it will update it on the fly. What kind of how many places do you want to go, northing and easting, if you're doing that, 4 places. Instead of degrees, maybe you want radians or something like that, or you want degrees, minutes, and seconds to be shown. That's how you can control this report, and that is automatic when you do that. You see the stationing update. Okay, then you could save this out if you wanted to. You could export it to Excel, you could convert it to a PDF depending on what you have installed on your machine. And then you have that ability. You'll also notice up here in the Civil Report browser, this is where it's saving it temporarily. So if you were to close it out, this is the way it does all the reports, saves them to your app data local temp folder as an XML. So if you run a bunch of reports, it's going to save them there, and you can get them back if you need to from that location. This is really big in earthwork. A lot of times it will create a earthwork report automatically for you, and if you close it down, you have to run earthwork to get it back again, or you can take a look and see where it's located right here, and you can go find it in that location. Alright, so that gets us through exercise 2 for building ramp 4.